In the arid heart of 19th century Texas, beneath a relentless sun that cracked the parched earth, the Comanche warrior Takoda rode back to his village after a reconnaissance foray. The hot wind carried the acrid scent of gunpowder and smoke, remnants of a recent settler attack on a nearby Apache camp. Among the thorny bushes and reddish stones, a subtle movement caught his eye. There, huddled like a small wounded animal, was an Apache girl, no more than 6 years old, her dark eyes glistening with tears as she clutched a torn and dirty rag doll. Takoda dismounted slowly, his moccasins touching the stony ground with care. The child stared at him with a mixture of fear and despair that touched something deep within his chest, hardened by years of war. Without a word, he extended his hand, and she, trembling, accepted his protection. The warrior knew that taking her home would change everything. The Comanche village buzzed with the unexpected arrival. Women stopped braiding baskets and men ceased work on their spears as they watched Takoda return with the little Apache girl in his arms. The smell of bison meat roasting over the fires mingled with the palpable tension in the air. Elders gathered in a circle, their grave voices echoing concern and distrust. "An Apache among us," murmured Ayana, one of the matriarchs, shaking her head. "This will bring trouble." Takoda met their harsh gazes with determination, explaining how he found her orphaned and helpless. As he spoke, the girl hid behind his legs, observing everything with childlike curiosity. The distant sound of drums seemed to echo the accelerated heartbeat of hearts divided between compassion and prudence. Some children approached curiously, offering shy little smiles, while the adults debated the intruder's fate. The following days brought a delicate routine of adaptation. Takoda taught the girl, whom he decided to call Little Ayana, her first words in Comanche pointing to simple objects: horse, water, home. She learned quickly, her crystalline laughter echoing through the camp when she managed to pronounce correctly. One of the older women, Nayeli, wove a small blanket with traditional Comanche patterns, silently handing it to the child. But the news carried by messengers was grim. American soldiers were advancing through the region, establishing forts and demanding submission from the tribes. Attacks between different indigenous groups intensified, fueled by desperation and external pressure. The scorching midday sun offered no respite, and even the horses seemed restless, sensing the growing tension. Takoda watched little Ayana play with other children and felt the weight of responsibility grow on his shoulders like an approaching storm. The decisive moment arrived with the drumming of hooves and the gleam of blue uniforms on the horizon. An American Army patrol led by Captain Morrison invaded the region, demanding information about hostile activities and seeking to establish a civilized dialogue. The entire village gathered in tension, forming a defensive semicircle as Takoda positioned himself at the front, translating the officer's harsh words. "We know you are harboring subversive elements," Morrison declared, his cold eyes scanning the group. When his gaze fell upon little Ayana, clearly recognizing her Apache features, the atmosphere became electric. "This child could be useful for our purposes," the captain said, extending his hand. The reddish evening sky seemed to reflect the blood that could be shed. Takoda felt his heart race, remembering brothers and friends lost in similar confrontations. The time had come to choose between the safety of his tribe and the protection of the one who had become his heart's daughter. In a gesture that surprised everyone, Takoda stepped forward, placing himself physically between the soldiers and little Ayana. His words came out firm but without aggression. "This child is under my protection. She lost her family and found a new one here with us." Captain Morrison frowned, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon, but something in the warrior's dignified posture made him hesitate. One of the village women stepped forward, placing a shawl over the girl's shoulders in a protective gesture. Others joined, forming a silent but powerful human barrier. The night wind began to blow, raising small whirlwinds of dust that danced between the two groups. "You risk a lot for an Apache," the officer said, but his voice had lost some of its initial harshness. Takoda replied serenely, "We risk everything for an innocent child. That doesn't make us less warriors, it makes us more human." The standoff lasted for long minutes, until Morrison, perhaps touched by the dignity of the scene, signaled his men to retreat. Beneath the starry canopy of the Texas desert, the Comanche village found a new form of peace. Little Ayana slept soundly in Takoda's arms as he told her ancient legends of his people, adapting them to include warriors from different tribes who learned to live in harmony. The central fire crackled softly, its flames dancing like ancestral spirits, blessing that improbable family. The village women had woven for the girl not only blankets, but also a definitive place in their hearts. The men, once skeptical, now watched her play with their own children and recognized that courage sometimes manifests itself in protecting the most vulnerable. The night wind blew softer, carrying promises of a future where difference would not be a cause for war, but for mutual enrichment. Takoda looked at the stars and knew that this simple act of compassion had changed not only the fate of a child, but the heart of an entire community. In times of conflict, love had prevailed over fear. The following months brought profound transformations to the Comanche village. Little Ayana grew quickly, her vibrant personality winning over even the most resistant. In the mornings, she helped the women gather roots and medicinal herbs, her small, skilled hands learning the secrets of the arid land. Takoda watched with growing pride as she mastered both Comanche words and some Apache expressions she still remembered, creating a unique linguistic bridge between the cultures. The morning sun gilded her brown skin as she ran between the teepees, laughing with the other children, who now treated her as a true sister. But external news remained worrying. Conflicts intensified in the region, and rumors of forced resettlement arrived on the desert winds. Nayeli, the elder who had woven the girl's first blanket, watched the horizons with growing unease. "Hard times are not over yet," she murmured, caressing the dark hair of the child who had become a granddaughter to everyone in the village, without exception. Winter brought unexpected challenges when a heavy snowstorm hit the region, a rare occurrence in those lands. The teepees bowed under the weight of the snow and supplies began to dwindle. Little Ayana, now 7, showed admirable resilience, helping to collect firewood and comforting the smaller children who cried from the cold. Takoda taught her survival techniques, from how to identify edible plants under the snow to how to read weather signs in the dark clouds. During the long, freezing nights, the village gathered around the fires, and the girl surprised everyone by telling stories that blended Apache and Comanche legends, creating unique narratives that made the adults reflect on the cultural richness emerging from this union. Her eyes shone in the firelight as she gestured, recreating epic battles, where warriors from both tribes fought side by side against common enemies. Hunger and cold further united the community, and little Ayana became a living symbol that different peoples could prosper together. Spring arrived accompanied by unexpected visitors, an Apache delegation led by an old shaman named Kuruk, who had survived the massacre where little Ayana had lost her original family. The encounter was initially tense, with warriors from both sides brandishing weapons as they stared at each other under the rising sun. Takoda positioned himself protectively beside the girl, who hid behind him, confused and scared to hear her native tongue again after so long. Kuruk, a tall, thin man with deep scars on his face, approached slowly, his eyes fixed on the child. "You are my niece's daughter," he said in Apache, his voice filled with contained emotion. The revelation hit the village like lightning, and little Ayana was paralyzed between two worlds, looking alternately at Takoda and the unfamiliar shaman. The spring wind stirred the feathers of the headdresses, creating a visual symphony of colors and movements as two cultures peacefully confronted each other, united only by the destiny of a girl who represented the bridge between their ancestral peoples. Negotiations stretched for entire days, with long conversations around the central fire, where leaders of both tribes debated little Ayana's future. Kuruk argued that she should return to her Apache people to learn ancestral traditions and honor the memory of her biological parents. Takoda, in turn, passionately defended that the girl had found a new family among the Comanches, and that forcing her to choose would be cruel. Tension grew by the hour, with some warriors from both sides whispering about resolving the issue by force. Little Ayana remained silent, carefully observing every word, every gesture, as if trying to decipher a complex puzzle. During the nights, she cried softly in Takoda's arms, confused about her true identity. The Apache shaman, perceiving the child's suffering, began to question his own convictions. Perhaps the answer was not a choice between cultures, but a harmonious fusion of both, respecting both her Apache roots and her Comanche upbringing. The solution emerged unexpectedly when little Ayana, tired of being treated as an object of dispute, stood up during one of the meetings and spoke with a maturity surprising for her age. "I am Apache by birth and Comanche by choice," she declared, alternating between the two languages with impressive fluency. "I do not want to abandon either people, for both live in my heart." Her words echoed through the circle of leaders, creating a respectful silence. Kuruk and Takoda exchanged glances, recognizing the girl's precocious wisdom. The Apache shaman then proposed an unprecedented agreement. Little Ayana would spend half the year with each tribe, learning the traditions of both peoples and serving as a cultural ambassador. The proposal was met with initial skepticism, but gradually gained support, as the leaders realized its potential to strengthen ties between the communities. The setting sun tinged the sky golden as they sealed the agreement with a joint ritual, where Apache eagle feathers and sacred Comanche beads were interwoven into a unique necklace that little Ayana would wear as a symbol of her dual heritage. Years passed, and little Ayana, now a 15-year-old young woman, became a respected figure among both tribes. She perfectly mastered the languages, customs, and traditions of both Apache and Comanche, serving as a mediator in conflicts and facilitating beneficial trade exchanges for both peoples. Takoda, now with graying hair, watched with paternal pride as his adopted daughter had become a living bridge between cultures. During the annual meetings between the tribes, she led special ceremonies where elements of both traditions harmoniously blended. Her story spread across the prairies, inspiring other tribes to reconsider old rivalries. Kuruk, the Apache shaman, had become like a grandfather to her, teaching her the spiritual secrets of her native people. Beneath the stars of the Texas desert, little Ayana often reflected on her extraordinary destiny, a war orphan transformed into a symbol of peace, living proof that love and understanding can overcome centuries of tribal conflict, creating bridges where before there were only chasms of distrust and ancestral hostility. Little Ayana's destiny took an unexpected turn when, at 18, she fell in love with Mape, a young Lakota warrior who had arrived in the region as a peace envoy among the Plains tribes. The young man had lost his family in conflicts with settlers and found in her a kindred spirit who deeply understood the pain of displacement. Takoda observed the romance blossom with mixed feelings, proud of the strong woman his adopted daughter had become, but concerned about the complications this union might bring. The three tribes involved, Comanche, Apache, and Lakota, had complex histories of alliances and rivalries dating back generations. During warm summer nights when crickets sang in the prairies, Ayana and Mape spoke for hours about dreams of unifying native peoples against the growing pressure from colonizers. Kuruk, the Apache shaman, saw the relationship as an opportunity to expand the network of alliances, while some more conservative warriors feared that traditions would be further diluted in this growing cultural mix. Mape's marriage proposal triggered intense debates in the three communities involved. Lakota elders questioned whether accepting a woman raised among Comanches and Apaches would compromise the purity of their sacred lineages. On the Comanche side, some warriors argued that losing Ayana to another tribe would be like handing over a treasure to rivals. The Apaches, in turn, were divided between pride in seeing a daughter of their blood choose her own destiny and concern about her definitive departure from their ancestral lands. Takoda mediated the discussions with wisdom gained over the years, reminding everyone how the girl's arrival had enriched their lives. During a particularly bright full moon, he convened an extraordinary council, bringing together representatives from the three tribes. The central fire crackled loudly, illuminating faces painted with different traditional colors, yet united by the need to find a solution that honored both the young couple's feelings and the ancient traditions of each people involved in this complex web of intertribal relationships. The wedding ceremony that followed was an unprecedented event in the history of the American Plains. Held on neutral territory, near a sacred lake considered blessed by all tribes, The celebration lasted 3 days and 3 nights. Ayanna wore a dress that combined visual elements from all 3 cultures: Comanche embroidery on the bodice, Apache beads on the arms, and Lakota feathers in her braided hair. Mapi, in turn, wore a headdress that blended symbols of power and protection from all involved traditions. Hundreds of people camped around the site, creating a temporary town where different languages mingled in a harmonious chorus of celebration. Shamans from the 3 tribes conducted joint rituals, invoking ancestral spirits to bless the union that symbolized a new era of cooperation. Takoda, moved, symbolically handed his adopted daughter to the groom, while Kuruk offered traditional Apache blessings. The aroma of roasted meats, burning sacred herbs, and wildflowers created a magical atmosphere that would forever be etched in the memory of all present as a landmark of a historical transformation. The first years of marriage brought unexpected challenges as the American government intensified its policy of confining tribes to delimited reservations. Ayanna and Mape, now parents of twins representing the 4th generation of this cultural fusion, faced increasing pressure to settle permanently in a single location. Federal officials offered financial incentives for families who agreed to move to reservations, but also threatened retaliation against those who resisted the new policies. The young mother felt torn between the desire to protect her children and the responsibility to preserve the nomadic traditions of her adopted peoples. Mapi, an experienced warrior, organized secret meetings with leaders of other tribes to plan strategies for peaceful resistance. During cold winter nights, the couple discussed intensely about the future, weighing the immediate safety of their children against the preservation of a way of life that was rapidly disappearing under the relentless pressure of American territorial expansion that did not respect cultural borders or ancestral rights established for millennia. The final decision came after a traumatic episode when federal soldiers attacked a nearby Lakota camp, forcing the emergency evacuation of women and children. Ayanna, carrying her 2-year-old twins, rode for days until she found refuge in Comanche territory, where Takoda, now a respected elder, received her with relief and concern. The desperate escape experience crystallized in the young mother's mind the brutal reality that the world of her childhood was coming to an end. Reunited with the leadership of the 3 tribes in an extraordinary council, she proposed a radical strategy: establish an integrated community on lands less coveted by settlers, where traditions could be preserved through gradual adaptation to new times. The proposal generated intense controversy, with purists arguing that this would represent the destruction of distinct tribal identities. However, Ayanna's eloquence and the urgency of the political situation convinced many that cultural survival required flexibility and innovation, even if it meant painful transformations in the traditional social structures that had defined these communities for countless generations. 20 years after her arrival as an orphaned Apache girl, Ayanna had become the unofficial matriarch of a unique community in the Great Plains. The village she and Mape helped establish housed families of Comanche, Apache, Lakota, and even some white origin who had chosen to live among the natives. Her twin children, now adults, spoke 5 languages fluently and served as interpreters in negotiations with federal authorities. Takoda, despite his advanced age, still actively participated in the councils, his role as Ayanna's adoptive father giving him special status in the hybrid community. The school the community established taught both traditional knowledge and skills necessary to navigate the expanding modern world. During golden autumn afternoons, Ayanna often sat under the sacred tree in the center of the village, watching children of different backgrounds play together and telling stories that wove the traditions of multiple cultures into cohesive narratives. Her journey from rejected orphan to respected leader proved that even in times of radical change, love and adaptability could create lasting bridges between seemingly irreconcilable worlds. The arrival of the 20th century brought even deeper transformations to Ayanna's community. The federal government implemented new educational policies that required native children to be sent to distant boarding schools where they would be civilized according to American standards. The matriarch, now 40 with her hair beginning to gray, organized an ingenious resistance, by creating her own school that met government requirements while secretly preserving ancestral teachings. In the mornings, children learned English, mathematics, and American history. In the afternoons, they received instruction in native languages, traditional medicine, and sacred ceremonies. Mahpe, her faithful companion, adapted to modern times by becoming a skilled negotiator who secured federal resources for the community without compromising its cultural autonomy. Ayana's twins, Takeshi and young Ayana, distinguished themselves as leaders of the new generation, mastering both traditions and the technological innovations arriving in the West. Telegraphs, railroads, and barbed wire fences reshaped the landscape, but the village remained an oasis of cultural continuity amid the accelerated transformation of rural America. Challenges multiplied when World War I erupted, and young natives were conscripted to serve in the American Army. Takeshi, Ayana's elder son, voluntarily enlisted as a code talker, using tribal languages to transmit secret military messages in the European trenches. His departure shook the community, especially Takoda, now a centenarian patriarch whose wisdom was consulted in all important decisions. Ayana organized weekly protection ceremonies where women from different tribes gathered to weave quilts decorated with sacred symbols that they sent to soldiers abroad. Letters arriving from France brought surprising reports. Native Americans were respected for their communication and survival skills, qualities they had developed in their ancestral lands. The irony was not lost on anyone. The same government that had tried to suppress their cultures now depended on these traditions to win a world war. During winter nights, Ayana read Takeshi's correspondence aloud to the entire community, her words echoing around the fires like bridges between two worlds in conflict. The veteran's return brought unexpected changes to community dynamics. Takeshi came back from the war with a broadened perspective on the world, speaking of European cities, vast oceans, and diverse cultures that existed beyond American borders. He had married a French nurse named Marie, who arrived in the village pregnant and speaking hesitant English mixed with French words. The arrival of the European daughter-in-law initially caused strangeness, but Ayana, remembering her own experience as an outsider, welcomed Marie with maternal generosity. The young Frenchwoman showed curiosity about native traditions, learning to prepare remedies with local herbs and actively participating in women's ceremonies. Her son, born in the spring of 1920, represented a new dimension in the community's cultural miscegenation, a boy with Apache, Comanche, Lakota, and French blood running in his veins. Takoda, holding his great-grandson in his trembling arms, whispered blessings in 4 different languages, recognizing that cultural boundaries continued to expand in unforeseen but always enriching ways for that extraordinary family. The 1920s marked the apex of Ayana's influence as a regional leader. Her reputation as a mediator and visionary spread throughout the territory, attracting visitors who sought to learn about the unique model of cultural integration she had developed. Anthropologists from the University of Oklahoma extensively documented the community's practices, recognizing it as a rare case of successful cultural preservation amidst forced assimilation. Young Ayana, her daughter, had become a respected educator who traveled to distant reservations, teaching methods of peaceful cultural resistance. The community prospered economically through traditional crafts sold in nearby towns, creating sustainable income that maintained its independence. During annual intertribal gatherings, leaders from across the continent visited the village to observe how different cultures could coexist without losing their distinct identities. Mahpe, despite his advanced age, still led hunting and fishing expeditions that served both to sustain the community and to teach the youth ancestral survival skills that remained relevant even in the modern era of increasing industrialization. The years of the Great Depression severely tested the community's resilience, but also demonstrated the wisdom of Ayana's traditional practices. While neighboring cities faced massive hunger and unemployment, the village maintained its self-sufficiency through subsistence farming, cooperative hunting, and barter systems that did not depend on the national monetary economy. Ayana, now a 50-year-old woman with unquestionable moral authority, organized aid programs that distributed food to needy white families nearby, reversing decades of paternalistic relations between settlers and natives. Marie, the French daughter-in-law, established an improvised clinic where she applied European medical knowledge combined with traditional native medicine, creating innovative treatments for illnesses affecting both Native Americans and whites in the region. Takeshi's mixed-heritage son grew up as a living symbol of humanity's ability to transcend racial and cultural barriers through love and mutual understanding. Takoda, miraculously still alive at 90, observed these transformations with serenity, often commenting that he had lived long enough to see the circle of life complete itself in ways he had never imagined possible. When Ayana turned 60, the community organized a week-long celebration, bringing together representatives from dozens of tribes and hundreds of descendants of the extended family she had created. Takoda, now a centenarian and venerable as a living oracle, presided over the main ceremony, where the founding stories of the village were retold. The narrative invariably began with that distant afternoon when a Comanche warrior found an orphaned Apache girl hidden among dried bushes, saving her not only from physical death, but offering her a life of transformative purpose. During the ceremonial speeches, tribal leaders from all over North America paid tribute to Ayana's revolutionary vision, recognizing how her example had inspired similar movements of cultural preservation in their own communities. Her great-grandchildren ran through the camp, speaking a fascinating mix of languages, representing the natural evolution of cultures that chose to grow together instead of destroying each other. Beneath the eternal stars of the Texas sky, the same celestial vastness that had witnessed the first hesitant steps of a frightened girl decades earlier, Ayana reflected on an extraordinary life that definitively proved how simple acts of compassion can alter the course of history in profound and lasting ways.